What is the Tomorrowland of the future? To figure that out, you have to solve something that I call the Tomorrowland Problem. And no, it's not that nobody went to see the George Clooney Tomorrowland movie, although that was a problem. Disney has built so many different versions of Tomorrowland around the world over the years, but the future has a tricky habit of constantly changing. So the tomorrow you envision and build for Tomorrowland starts to look like yesterday pretty quickly. Disney hasn't been able to keep up with tomorrow. That's the Tomorrowland problem. What does tomorrow mean exactly? According to Disney, right now it's a combination of rocket jets, Star Wars, alien encounters, no, not that one sadly, monsters telling jokes, fish, and gas-powered cars. Tomorrowland at Disney World and Disneyland are kind of a mess. But Disney just announced 2 additions to Tomorrowland on both coasts that may seem small at first, but could actually prove to alter the course of tomorrow as we know it. Hi, I'm James from Guide to WDW, and welcome to another episode of Future World, where I read way too much into every little detail Disney announces to try to predict the tomorrow of Tomorrowland. That was a fun bit of wordplay I wrote for the first episode, but that's what this episode is literally about, all things Tomorrowland. And it started with something small. The other day, Walt Disney Imagineering announced some really nice upgrades to Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger spin at Magic Kingdom. They were unexpected, very welcome, but in the grand scheme of things, not that mind-blowing. I made a short-form video explaining it, thought, that's nice, time to move on with my day. But because I'm me, I kept thinking about it. Why Buzz? Why now? Then I started thinking about the state of Tomorrowland in general, and that whole Tomorrowland problem. And now I'm making an entire video diving deep on recent Tomorrowland announcements, digging up old rumors, analyzing business relationships, and looking at Tomorrowlands around the globe, including some absolutely wild stuff happening in Tokyo, to see what the Tomorrowland of the future could look like, including my patented bold prediction of what might be the most massive change to Tomorrowland in Disney World's history. And all that started with upgraded targets in Space Ranger Spin. So let's start there. Walt Disney Imagineering recently made a surprise announcement that Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin will be closing in Magic Kingdom later this year to get an update including a new show scene, enhanced gameplay, new blasters, and upgraded vehicles. These changes are significant, fixing the 2 biggest issues with the ride. The ride will now start with a new scene with a brand new original character, a support bot named Buddy, who was designed through a collaboration between Imagineering and Pixar. Which means that we're getting a new animatronic, albeit a fairly simple one. But hey, like we say on this show, everything's better with animatronics. And personally, I have a soft spot for kind of goofy Tomorrowland animatronics, so I'm actually very excited to meet our new Buddy. This opening scene looks like a chance to have target practice with Buddy, and test out your new blaster, which is getting a huge upgrade. First of all, they're handheld now. This fixes the first big problem that the ride has had since it opened in 1998. In the current version of the ride, the blaster is attached to your Omnimover, making aiming a challenge and even frustrating. If you've been on any of the other versions of the ride around the world that already have handheld blasters, like Astro Blasters at Disneyland, you know how big of an upgrade this is. Aiming with your arm is just more intuitive and more fun. The other big fix is that it's going to be way easier to tell what you're blasting. The current version of the ride has no real feedback other than your score getting higher. The new blasters will have vibration and sound effects for feedback, and an always-on laser in 2 different colors per Star Cruiser, so you can actually tell where you're aiming. The Z targets will be digitally enhanced, and will react and light up when you hit them, corresponding to the color of your blaster. The new targets look similar to the ones at the Shanghai Disneyland version of the ride, maybe a little less obviously like a screen. And also like at Shanghai, the new ride vehicles will have a video scoreboard. Between the visuals, the vibrations, and the sounds, it should make for much more responsive gameplay. All in all, these are really nice upgrades. Disney has a track record of plussing up rides like Pirates, Haunted Mansion, and Jungle Cruise, but this is the first time they've ever done this for Buzz Lightyear, which was already feeling pretty old in a land about tomorrow. And hopefully there are a few surprises for when the ride reopens. This is a lengthy refurbishment. Buzz will close in August and reopen next year. So this will take at least 5 months, maybe more. Maybe it won't be on the level of Test Track 3.0, but they could augment the scenes with some projections, kinda like what they did with Alice in Wonderland at Disneyland a few years ago, or add new figures for the targets. To answer that question I posed earlier, why Buzz and why now? For one, Toy Story 5 is going to be much more Buzz-focused, and that comes out in 2026. So having the Buzz ride ready for that opening is good synergy. But I think there's also a really good strategic reason for updating Buzz now that plays into Disney's long-term vision for Tomorrowland. More about that later. But first, let's talk about an announcement from this year's South by Southwest that I didn't have time to get to in my last video. The Fantastic Four are coming to Tomorrowland. At Disneyland, not Disney World, because those characters are contractually stuck on an island in Florida. Now, unlike the number 4, this is a little odd. California Adventure already has a land whose whole purpose is to have all the Marvel characters. Since it opened in 2021, Avengers Campus has regularly had new characters debut right as a new movie or show drops, like Loki, Deadpool, and Blippi. I have 2 toddlers, so I don't have enough time to keep up with the MCU. I just assume that Blippi's in everything now. Can't wait to see what they do with him in Avengers Doomsday. Anyway, why put the Fantastic Four, the quintessential Marvel team, in Tomorrowland? Well, at South by, Kevin Feige said that they were inspired by the retro-futuristic look of Tomorrowland while creating the world for the movie.
I've always been drawn to the places that showcase Walt's vision for the future, particularly Tomorrowland and Epcot. They share a mid-century retro-futuristic design language that I love, and I love it so much, in fact, that it served as an inspiration for a new film coming out this summer, The Fantastic Four: First Steps.
With the Fantastic Four aesthetically fitting in Tomorrowland, Disney is debuting the characters there. Feige also said that the team's robot Herbie will be making its way to Disneyland as well, giving us another goofy, lovable Tomorrowland robot.
We're also working with Bruce and Imagineering to create a Herbie robot that you'll be able to see in real life.
That's right, and he is going to be amazing. It's a little tough with all the balancing, but anyway, we've got some other cool plans that we're going to announce later this spring.
We love to see that. So once again, hey, nice little update. New characters, another new robot, but here's where things get wild. If Fantastic Four is a hit, it's not too big of a stretch to imagine a scenario where Disney uses Fantastic Four as an excuse to overhaul all of Tomorrowland. Offhand Disney has a great video that goes into more detail about all of this, so be sure to check that out. And one thing he points out is that Marvel has name-checked Sid Mead as an inspiration for Fantastic Four: The First Steps. At Comic-Con, director Matt Shakman said, "We're doing a retro-future 60s. Sid Mead was an inspiration. The 60s to me is all about optimism." Mead was the concept artist behind the first Star Trek movie, Blade Runner, Tron, and the 2015 Tomorrowland movie. And I lied earlier, at least one person saw that movie. Me. And it's pretty solid. As Offhand Disney suggests, if Disney is making a Fantastic Four movie inspired by the retro-future look of Tomorrowland, and they're bringing the characters of this movie to Tomorrowland, maybe they're going to bring some more Sid Mead-inspired aesthetics to the land as well. But here's the thing. We've been waiting for a new Tomorrowland for ages. The current version of Tomorrowland at Disneyland isn't exactly setting the world aflame. As of last year, Disney was reportedly looking for contractors to work on a big Tomorrowland overhaul construction project, and there was a strong sense that they would announce a new Tomorrowland at the 2024 D23. But D23 came and went, and we still haven't seen any news, like it's invisible. Maybe Disney is waiting to see how audiences react to Fantastic Four to lock in a direction. If Fantastic Four is a hit, they could refresh all the facades with the new aesthetic inspired by the movie. In terms of attractions, there's a lot they could do. Autopia is getting electric vehicles in 2026, so that's staying put. But the Carousel of Innovation's Launch Bay building is prime real estate that is extremely underutilized. Star Wars launched in 2019. It doesn't need a launch bay anymore. A Fantastic Four attraction anchoring this overhaul would make a ton of sense here. Although I have some other ideas of what Disney could put in this building that I'll talk about a bit later. The pieces are all there for Disneyland to pretty easily put a lot more Marvel into Tomorrowland. Maybe the reason that they announced the upgrades for Buzz at Disney World but not at Disneyland yet is that its fate is also up in the air. If Fantastic Four flops, Disneyland gets the new Buzz upgrades. But if Fantastic Four is a hit, maybe this becomes a Marvel-themed shooter. Either an original Fantastic Four ride, or they just poured over Ant-Man and the Wasp Nano Battle from Hong Kong. They could also plausibly bring the Iron Man simulator from Hong Kong's Tomorrowland here to replace Star Tours, keeping the ride system but updating the theme. Add that, and to paraphrase the late great Carl Weathers, now you have a Marvel stew going, baby. Although I sincerely hope that Tomorrowland doesn't just become another Marvel land. I prefer a Tomorrowland that's a combination of different sci-fi and retro-futuristic properties. If it were up to me, I think an ideal but still realistic Tomorrowland overhaul at Disneyland would be to add the Sid Mead aesthetics, put a Fantastic Four attraction in the launch bay, and then bring back the People Mover but add some sick Tron-like lights for the vehicles in the evening. Finally, demolish Astro Orbiter to restore the open feeling of the entrance plaza, and replace it with the Jetpacks ride from Shanghai where rocket jets used to be. That would be a Tomorrowland that feels more kinetic, exciting, and timeless, while still in line with Disney's current strategy of leveraging IP in the parks, and without having to tear everything to the ground. Imagine that, a Tomorrowland of the future. But we don't have to imagine what that would look like, because they're already building that in Tokyo Disneyland, which is a park that I've been covering a lot on the shorts on this channel. I've recently been doing daily videos, diving deep on the latest news like how Disney's responding to Epic Universe, plus showing comparisons between Tokyo Disneyland and Disney World. So be sure to get subscribed so you don't miss any of those videos. But if you've seen any of my Tokyo videos already, you know that they're already living in the future there, especially when it comes to Disney. So Tokyo Disneyland did a crazy thing last year, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. They closed down their Space Mountain and demolished it, which is something that is almost unfathomable to me as a US Disney Parks fan. But it looks like it's going to be worth it, because they are building a brand new Space Mountain from the ground up, with a massive $450 million budget. And when that opens in 2027, it will debut a bold new direction for Tomorrowland. First, let's take a closer look at the concept art for this new Space Mountain building and this new plaza. Everything is less angular, geometric, and stark. More round, flowing, and glowing. Less retro future and more organic. Still very sci-fi, but more optimistic feeling. A vision of tomorrow where the advances of human technology exist in harmony with nature. That speaks to the story of Tokyo's new Space Mountain, which is about appreciating planet Earth. Last year, Disney trademarked the name Space Mountain Earthrise in Japan, which may be the new name of the attraction. Imagineer Kathleen Davis said, quote, "It's not only a whole new ride experience, but the story also has so much emotion. Through the queue and then on the ride, we see our connection to our planet and gain a new perspective for how special it is in all of the universe." That actually sounds a lot like the original theme of Epcot. Now the lesson from Epcot is that Earth is only worth saving because we invented rock and roll. Which, fair enough. But what is this new ride going to be like? Well, it's going to be very different than any Space Mountain that has come before. It's an Intamin coaster, which is very exciting. In case you don't know, Disney doesn't manufacture their own roller coasters by themselves. They collaborate with third-party contractor companies. Like for Guardians of the Galaxy, Disney developed the concept and the Omnicoaster vehicle, and then worked with Vekoma to actually manufacture the coaster. Disney's been mainly working with Vekoma on their big coasters in recent years, including Expedition Everest, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, Guardians, and Tron. And they haven't worked with Intamin as much, notably just on California Screamin' / Incredicoaster at California Adventure, and Raging Spirits in Tokyo Disneyland. But Intamin has been crushing it lately with Universal, Hagrid's, Velocicoaster, and the upcoming Hiccups Wing Gliders at Epic Universe. These range from dynamic family coasters to pulse-pounding thrill rides, with really innovative elements. And Intamin's Space Mountain at Tokyo looks to be just as cutting edge. There are a few leaks about this project that look really exciting. If you're sensitive to spoilers, you can skip ahead to the next chapter. Photographs from the construction site seem to indicate that there could be a drop track like at Hagrid's, where the whole track drops down vertically. And this rumored track layout shows a tilted launch, where you would start horizontal and then the entire track would tilt back before launching you. That would be so cool in a Space Mountain. Now, the speculation for the drop track seems to be from the specific type of track piece spotted at the construction site. I'm not sure if that's actually the piece for the tilted launch, or if the coaster will have both. But either way, this is really exciting. A fast, futuristic, next-gen Space Mountain with plenty of tricks. Now, Tokyo Disneyland is not owned by Disney, it's owned by the Oriental Land Company. But Walt Disney Imagineering still designs all the attractions there. They've already been working on Tokyo's new Space Mountain for a few years now, so them partnering with Intamin here could be a good sign for the Villains Coaster coming to Magic Kingdom. There's no information on who Disney will use to manufacture that coaster, but I'm personally rooting for Intamin. I think the Villains Coaster is an opportunity to make something that pushes the thrills a little further than what we've had at Magic Kingdom so far. A family coaster that cronks the intensity just a little bit. As in pull the lever cronk with a drop track. Huh? How cool would that be?
Why do we even have that lever?
And this Villains Coaster is a good place to jump into the next section, the future of Tomorrowland at Magic Kingdom, because I think Disney is currently laying the groundwork for some radical changes. The 2020s have been mainly focused on the other side of the park, with Tiana's Bayou Adventure, the Big Thunder Mountain track replacement, Villains Land, and the Cars expansion of Frontierland, which I'm now calling the Nissan Frontierland. In the next 5 years or so, that half of Magic Kingdom is going to feel like a brand new park, and Tomorrowland is going to feel like it's stuck in the past. Yes, we got Tron, but I think that's just one piece of the puzzle. Time for some wild speculation. When Disney makes big moves in their parks, they don't just do them at once. For example, they don't just make Galaxy's Edge. They also build Toy Story Land, and they put Mickey and Minnie in the Chinese theater to spread out the crowds. It's a multi-year, multi-attraction strategy, kind of like turning a ship. And Magic Kingdom is the biggest and most important metaphorical ship that Disney has. It's the most visited theme park in the world. To do something big with Tomorrowland would take years. And I think Disney has already announced several moves that indicate that this is happening as we speak. Over at Nissan Frontierland, most people are focused on the big rally race ride that will be like Radiator Springs Racers. But Disney also announced an attraction aimed at kids of all ages. Could that be something where kids can drive a car around a track? An attraction that essentially makes Tomorrowland Speedway obsolete. While Disney announced electrification for Autopia at Disneyland, they haven't done that for Magic Kingdom's Tomorrowland Speedway. And maybe that's because they know that Tomorrowland Speedway's days are numbered. That's a huge piece of real estate that they could use for something new. The gasoline fumes and puttering motors have been a bad thematic fit for Tomorrowland for decades at this point. And as fun as it is for a kid to drive a car, there's nothing futuristic about it. Another attraction that just doesn't fit thematically in Tomorrowland is Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor. I like the show, but calling Monsters, Inc. sci-fi is a real stretch. And over at the Monsters, Inc. land coming to Hollywood Studios, Disney has already announced that a new Monsters, Inc. theater show will be replacing Muppet Vision in the same theater. And this concept art includes a billboard for Laugh Floor. Do we really need 2 Monsters, Inc. theater shows at Disney World? So in a few years, we'll be able to go on a kids-focused Cars ride in Cars Land and see a Monsters show in the Monsters Land, easily freeing up Disney to replace those 2 attractions in Tomorrowland. Plus, there's the Stitch's Great Escape building, just sitting there, presumably still smelling like chili dogs. These are 3 spaces that are just begging for new attractions, making Tomorrowland and Magic Kingdom ripe for an overhaul. So here are 3 ideas of what Disney could put in each space. Since Disney likes to reuse ride systems, let's take a look at what they've already built. For the Monsters, Inc. space, I think a version of the Stark Flight Lab Kuka Arm ride would work really well. It's a small flat ride and it looks very technological and futuristic. They can't use Iron Man here, but Big Hero 6 feels like a pretty great fit, since they're making a point not to hide the tech in Stark Flight Lab. And doing something similar with Big Hero 6 fits really well thematically. Like step into the lab from Big Hero 6 and do superhero training with Baymax. Bonus points if they do a Baymax animatronic, and bonus points if they could give you a view of the ride from the People Mover track. That would be incredible. Hey, speaking of Incredibles, that feels like another property that could fit in Tomorrowland. It has the mid-century aesthetic. There are gadgets and robots, and Disney has not done nearly enough with the property in the parks. Incredicoaster is fun, but calling it the ideal Incredibles ride is a real stretch. Last time I used that joke, I promise. But Disney has used a track-based motion simulator a couple of times recently, and that is a proven ride system for a superhero ride. Spider-Man at Islands of Adventure still feels exciting and dynamic even as a 25-year-old ride. And Disney is using a similar ride system for Avengers Infinity Defense. I think this ride system could work really well with The Incredibles. You could encounter each member of the family during a battle, kind of like how you encounter all the villains in Spider-Man. Tomorrowland Speedway takes up about 3.5 to 4 acres. A big Incredibles ride like this could fit there, and having a mid-century facade would just be aces. Let's keep going forward by looking back to the rumors of a VR Sugar Rush ride from Wreck-It Ralph that would go in the Stitch building. Those rumors popped up a while ago. A VR ride makes so much sense in Tomorrowland, but I don't think that Disney would do a Wreck-It Ralph ride now. With Epic Universe featuring a Nintendo Land with a AR Mario Kart ride, having a Sugar Rush ride here would kind of feel like Disney's your mom saying, "No, sweetie, you don't need that. We already have Mario Kart at home." But something about video games just makes too much sense for Tomorrowland. And hey, it turns out that Disney has already been making some pretty big moves in the world of video games. They recently announced a partnership with Epic Games to create, quote, an all-new games and entertainment universe that will further expand the reach of beloved Disney stories and experiences. This universe will be connected to Fortnite. Last year, they devoted a huge section of the D23 Parks presentation to this games and entertainment universe. They even trotted out all the heads of their major studios to talk about this. But everything they said was so vague that even I was like, I have no clue what they're talking about. It kind of felt like when tech CEOs talk about their vision of the metaverse, so my eyes kind of glazed over. But things might be coming into focus now, and this partnership seems a lot more interesting for the parks. As part of this deal, Disney invested $1.5 billion for an equity stake in Epic. I don't think Disney makes that kind of investment without having a plan for a way to utilize this in their biggest revenue generator, the theme parks. And Disney has already started teasing integrations between this Disney Fortnite platform and the parks. For example, when Imagineering talked about the upcoming updates to Millennium Falcon, they said this.
So imagine, like, what if you could go to the park and have an experience in Smuggler's Run, go on this amazing mission, but then have that affect or connect your gameplay at home?
Imagineering has also been heavily promoting this new holotile technology they developed. I've seen so many videos about this over the past couple of years, and it's really cool, basically like a 360-degree treadmill that uses a series of spinning discs on the ground to move objects in any direction. And Imagineering has said that they're testing applications for holotile with video games and VR. Holotile could let you freely walk through a virtual world while wearing a headset, in a very Ready Player One-like way. Combine the long-standing rumors of a VR attraction, Holotile, and the massive Epic Games investment, well, what if Disney makes an attraction that leverages all three of these? A VR attraction using Holotile set in Disney's Fortnite universe. Basically the most immersive, visceral version of this game platform. The only place in the world where you can literally walk inside Fortnite. That would be a pretty epic response to Nintendo at Epic Universe. This type of attraction could also work well at the Carousel of Innovation's Launch Bay building at Disneyland too. And this attraction could get around the whole Tomorrowland problem because Epic knows how to regularly update Fortnite with new maps, new characters, and new gameplay. If they make an attraction based on a platform game like Fortnite, Disney could leverage Epic's expertise at keeping things feeling fresh without every update taking 10 years. So all of that is pretty wild speculation, but let's get even wilder, because Tomorrowland's most important attraction is Space Mountain. It's the heart of Tomorrowland. It's a people eater, it's iconic, it's historic, and it's old. Disney needs to do something here, and I don't mean that in the way of, oh, get rid of all these old dusty rides. The whole reason Tokyo tore down their old Space Mountain and are now building a new one is because roller coasters don't last forever. They all reach an end-of-life point. Because of wear and tear, eventually they need to either be rebuilt or replaced. Magic Kingdom's is the first Space Mountain, and this year it just celebrated its 50th anniversary, which means that Disney is going to have to do something, either rebuild or replace, sometime in the not-so-distant future. Remember the thing about how Disney is building replacements for the Speedway and Monsters, Inc. laugh floor? Well, they already did that for Space Mountain, putting Tron right next to it. Tron is basically a spiritual successor for Space Mountain. At Shanghai, they don't even have a Space Mountain, with Tron filling that role in their Tomorrowland. Now, look at everything that Disney is doing in Magic Kingdom. The expansions on the other side of the park, the other mountains getting lengthy overhauls, making sure Buzz Lightyear is updated and ready for the next decade or two, and building a next-gen Space Mountain right next to the original Space Mountain. They're preparing for something big. I don't think Disney would get rid of Space Mountain by any means, but I think they're prepping to go without it for a few years. This brings me to my bold prediction that's guaranteed to be true or your money back. Disney World will close Space Mountain for a multi-year overhaul. And this will be a big deal. Going without Space Mountain for 2 to 4 years is going to be tough for Magic Kingdom, especially with competition only increasing from Universal. Yes, it's an old ride, but it's extremely popular and absorbs crowds. I think all these moves Disney's made at Magic Kingdom over the past few years lessens the impact. Now, what will they do with Space Mountain? Well, they've actually done this before with Disneyland Space Mountain, completely rebuilding the ride from the ground up from 2003 to 2005, keeping the original track layout but giving it a lot of upgrades, new sounds and effects. I think that's what's most likely to happen here. Space Mountain is historic, and Disney might want to preserve the character of the original version, keeping the same layout but enhancing the ride experience in a few ways, like making the ride smoother or adding new projections and effects. But if Epic Universe is a smash hit and Universal keeps putting the heat on Disney, they might feel the need to try something bolder and newer. And as they've shown, they're not afraid to bulldoze the past. So they might go the route of Tokyo Disneyland to build something completely new and innovative, a Space Mountain fit for the 2030s. Although I can't ever see Disney World changing the outside of the building, the inside could be completely different. When will this start to happen? I think Space Mountain will close about a year after Villains Land and Nissan Frontierland open, which I'm guessing will be around 2030. If it is the more dramatic overhaul, they might even make an event of Space Mountain closing, like they did in Tokyo Disneyland with the Space Mountain Final Ignition celebration. Now, the big question, does all this solve the Tomorrowland problem? Isn't the future just going to keep changing? Well, yes, but I do think these changes I speculated could make the Tomorrowland problem a thing of the past. It rips out the attractions that just don't thematically fit. But with the new rides, you'd have a series of attractions that are a mesh of different eras of tomorrow. Mid-century, space age, retrofuturism, an 80s-inspired neo-cyber digital frontier, turn of the millennium sci-fi robotic tech, virtual reality, parts that can be updated and parts that can stay the same. It's not about one vision of what tomorrow will definitely be. It's about what we've been dreaming of for tomorrow since the beginning of Tomorrowland, the progress that the tomorrow of yesterday brought, and the promise of the tomorrow of the future. Disney couldn't keep up with tomorrow, but maybe they don't have to anymore. We'll see if I'm right about this. Let me know what you think will happen. This has been James from Guide to WDW. Thanks for watching, and I'll see ya in the future.